Your Legislators is made possible in part by the generous financial support of MAPE members, making Minnesota clean waters, safe communities, quality education, and veterans care happen. We work hard for Minnesotans. Live from St. Paul, Minnesota, we welcome you to another season of Your Legislators, a roundtable discussion featuring state lawmakers who are prepared to answer your questions and discuss important issues affecting citizens of Minnesota. Now, here's your moderator for tonight's program, Barry Anderson.
Good evening and welcome to this week's version of Your Legislators. We're delighted that you have joined us. I want to first express my thanks over the last couple of weeks to our guests. We had Legislative Auditor Jim Nobles 2 weeks ago, and last week we had Associate Justices Wilhelmina Wright and David Lillehog filling in for our legislative panel because the legislature was on break over the last couple of weeks because of the Passover and Easter holidays. So we're grateful that they filled in for us, but we're delighted that we have a full panel tonight to talk about the legislative issues that are of concern to Minnesotans. I want to remind you that this is your program. I invite you to send in your questions via telephone or the email or Twitter, our various electronic means, and they'll see that they get to the panel so that we'll be able to ask your questions, hence the tricky name, Your Legislators. This is your program. We begin this week, as we do each week, by introducing our distinguished panel of guests who will help us unravel the mysteries of St. Paul. And we turn first to my immediate left from Murdoch, District 17A, a frequent guest on our program, Representative Andrew Falk. Representative Falk, delighted to have you with us again.
Very great to be back, and thank you to everyone for tuning in. And a special thank you to Pioneer Public TV, which is out of Appleton, Minnesota, in my home district, District 17A. In the House, I represent all of Swift, Chippewa, most of Renville, and a small portion of Candiac County. I'm in my 6th year in the legislature. I serve as the vice chair of the Environment, Natural Resources, and Agriculture Finance Committee. And I did really enjoy having Jim Nobles on the program 2 weeks ago. I do serve on the Legislative Audit Commission, and it's really a pleasure and a true honor to be able to serve with somebody of such high standing and integrity as Auditor Jim Nobles.
I should also mention for our viewers who are interested not only in those two programs but in other programs, they are available at pioneer.org, so feel free to go there. Not now because you have to watch our program, but when we're all done, then you can go there and you can watch these past programs. Next in line to be introduced from District 36, Champlin, Minnesota, Senator John Hoffman. Senator Hoffman, tell our viewers a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Judge Anderson. My name is John Hoffman, and I live in Champlin. I represent Coon Rapids, Brooklyn Park, and Champlin in Senate District 36, which is comprised of the northern part of Hennepin County and just a little bit of Anoka County on the Coon Rapids side. And I serve on the Education E12 Finance as well as Environment and Energy Vice Chair as a freshman, and also on Health, Human Services, and Housing Policy, a subcommittee on Fish and Game, and also elections. So it's a pleasure to be here tonight in this wonderful format, and this is the first time here. So
we're delighted to have you with us. I will just mention to our viewers in the Champlin area, your constituents, that the Minnesota Supreme Court will be making making a spring visit to the high school there to hold an oral argument and to visit with students about the judicial branch of government. And we make visits to the Twin Cities area in the spring and generally greater Minnesota in the fall, and we're looking forward to that. Hope to see you there. So, thank you. All right, and then another frequent guest been with us many times over the years from District 12, Elbow Lake, Senator Tori Westrom. Senator Westrom, we're delighted to have you with us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Very good to be with you again tonight. This is a great program, and like Representative Falk, thanks to the Pioneer Television and all the parties that are part of making this long-standing program such a good program. I'm from Elbow Lake, Senate District 12, which encompasses 8 counties in western Minnesota: Stearns, Douglas, Pope, Grant, Stevens, Wilkin, Traverse, and Big Stone, ranging from Ortonville, Breckenridge on the border and all the way east back to Albany towards St. Cloud. So it's a very big rural district, and great to be here. I serve on the Environment, Ag, and Jobs Finance Division, Transportation Finance Division, Transportation Policy, and also the Finance Committee in the Senate. So,
Senator Westrom, if I have my math correct, I think you would be our veteran legislator on this panel. Am I right about
I
that?
think you'd be right. Not the youngest, but close to the youngest. But
No.
You're right. 18 years I've served, nine terms.
I should mention here, we won't be discussing it in any detail, but as we have with other members of the legislature who are seeking other offices, we should mention in passing that you're an announced candidate for another office as well. You want to just tell our viewers what that's about?
I am an announced candidate. I'm the Republican-endorsed candidate for Congress in the 7th Congressional District, which is 38 counties in western Minnesota, including my Senate district.
All right. And then finally, joining us from District 16A in Ghent, Representative Chris Swazinski.
That's right.
Did I get it?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
all right.
After a few episodes, we've got her nailed. So.
Yeah, maybe it'll stick. Who knows?
That's right. That's
Tell our
right.
viewers a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm the Polish guy that represents House District 16A, and that's just to the south of Andrews District, kind of the south side of the southwest side of the Minnesota River Valley. I have Lac-Parle, Yellow Medicine, most of Lyon, and a sliver of Redwood County in my district. And I serve on the Commerce, Higher Ed, and Bonding Committee in the House. And I live near Marshall, Minnesota, with my wife Jessica, and farm between Taunton and Porter, right on Highway 68 down that way. And had the pleasure of taking the seat over from Marty Seifert, who's running for governor at the time being. So, yeah, just have real exciting things going on in southwestern Minnesota, and happy to be here and support all those, and hope folks enjoy the show out at Pioneer Land today. So.
All right, let's jump right in. We've got viewers who want to talk about some of the controversial issues. We have viewers from Wright County and other places who want to know what the status of medical marijuana is and what might be happening there. And the viewers, not surprisingly, are divided on that question. Some think it's a great idea, others aren't so sure. Let's start with you, Senator Westrom, as our veteran member on the panel. What's your view on the medical marijuana discussion?
Well, it's actually got renewed legs, it seems like. The governor first early in session was saying it was not going to be an issue that he would sign this year, which really made the issue kind of moot this year. Recently he said the legislature shouldn't be hiding behind their desks and deal with this issue and vote it up or down. I don't know if it'll happen or not. I talked to some leadership and they say yes, some say no, and so I don't know. You know, it's really one of those tough issues is are we opening the floodgates or opening the camel's nose under the tent for other gateway drug, or how do we restrict it so it truly is just medical marijuana, medicinal purposes? And there's an article out in Colorado, fourth graders dealing drugs in the school today, and somewhere at the Capitol we're connecting that to the medical marijuana that's been recently legalized there, and some of the negative problems that would come about. And so that, I think, is the big concern. There are some real compelling stories with people. One in my district in Big Stone County where the family is divided in the sense that the mom and the child have moved to Colorado for medical reasons, and the father and the rest of the kids stay there. And so you hear those stories, and there's really a yearning to try to do the right thing, but not have it be a gateway or an opening to illegal drugs activity that would be negative in the public safety sense and harmful to youth and society. And so that's really the tension, that if there's a way to bottle it and make it a pharmaceutical dispense type drug, I think there'd be a lot more legislators ready to look at it even more seriously.
On this issue, I don't know if anybody else here is an author of the bill, but I'm a chief author of one of the bills in the House, and it's something I'm a strong proponent of, specifically for the reasons why Senator Westrom stated.
He used to be a representative, so it's okay.
He was demoted in one sense.
Ouch.
But
I did.
No, actually, I know the Bacher family quite well, and the progress that they're seeing with their youngest daughter, who is now living in Colorado, where she's actually able to access medical marijuana. In Colorado, you can actually have access for recreational use, which has made it easy for some people to get access to certain strands of medical marijuana as well. But the progress and the amount of change in this young girl's life is nothing short of amazing. And personally, there's no way I, in good conscience, can go and continue to deny this family access to a medicine that they need. And I really, truly think that this is an issue, too, where there is enough support to pass it in both the House and Senate. We'd like to go and see everybody coming together. But one of the challenges there has been some of law enforcement's concerns. And I do think law enforcement is slightly overstepping its boundaries here. If I'm sick, I don't go to a police officer or somebody in law enforcement to get a prescription. I go to a doctor. And these decisions should be made between doctors and patients and shouldn't be made, with law enforcement really inserting themselves in the process. The argument that this is a slippery slope, I do not buy, because the medical community already goes and prescribes a number of substances, drugs that are synthetic forms of other harder drugs. If you want to talk about things like OxyContin, we've got synthetic forms of opiates. If you want to talk about Adderall, it's a synthetic form of amphetamine. And so we already have the medical community prescribing things that are much worse in the eyes of drugs enforcement to people. And once again, when you have a prescribed substance, you can measure it, you can prescribe it in a certain amount, you can prescribe the way it's taken. And I have some concern because the idea that you can already go out and get access to marijuana illegally, one, we don't want to turn people who are law-abiding citizens into criminals when they're just trying to seek some relief and some help for their lives and some of the situations and the conditions that they're suffering. But also, when the argument has been made that they go out and buy things on the street, you don't know exactly what you're buying, you don't know what it's laced with, you don't know any of those other issues, and that's really putting people in absolute harm's way. It was brought to my attention, too, that with the number of states that have legalized medical marijuana, it's more than half the population of the country, United States of America. And in Minnesota, we typically view ourselves as being a leader in health care and health policy, and I think this is one area where we're lagging, and I'd like to see us move to the forefront.
Senator Hoffman, your thoughts?
I serve on Health, Human Services, and Housing Policy, and this was actual bill the Senator Dibble brought forward just prior to us breaking for Passover and Easter break. And we're going to bring it up again tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. So if you want to come hang out in G15 tomorrow morning. And the stories are compelling. I mean, with what you and Senator Westrom are saying, the families that are there are truly compelling, and it's heart-wrenching. Talking with law enforcement officials, their whole contention all along has been about the growth and distribution, and how do you regulate and how do you enforce the growth and distribution of it. If you look at the side by side, Colorado and California, for example, you're able to have some of your own plants, so to speak. But in Minnesota, that's not an issue. I mean, they've clearly taken that out. And the medical side of it is there's some great medical repositories out there that can track that stuff when they're coming, where that medicine is going. And what we're finding, and what we'll hear more tomorrow, is on that distribution side, not on the sense of my personal growth of the marijuana, but on the distribution side of the medical side of it. How do we track it? Same way we track a level 1 or a level 2 narcotic or a OxyContin that Representative Falk talked about. Clearly, we have systems in place that can track that. No doubt, the oils, no doubt, the pills that are already there, Senator Westrom, there are pill forms that are there that are doing some amazing things for children and folks within our society. It's worth taking a policy look at it, and I think if we can help understand the regulation side of it and the enforcement side of it and clearly get that personal growth and distribution out of it, I think we can regulate this and do a good job with what I'm hearing so far. So I'll be looking tomorrow.
Representative Swedzinski?
Well, I think, Barry, we talked about kind of at the beginning of the conversation really that it seemed like the whole conversation had died. And really, Governor kind of spurred that on with the story coming out in the news about telling these women to go out on the street and purchase some product for their own use. And I think that's, you talk to law enforcement community and you talk to those folks, there is a lot of concerns there with what's the potential going to be. And I think, this is a leadership from behind, essentially, the federal government. And, if this was a target pharmacy or something that would be looking at, from a broader sense of the word, when we're taking, at a legitimate source, Colorado right now is dealing with whatever they call the dispensatories or whatever they call the dispensaries. Yeah, that's kind of where a lot of the products being moved out of, and kind of the self prescription of it. And I think generally as Andrew talked about and Senator Hoffman as well, looking at the oils potentially, or looking at something on a very limited, very controlled basis. I mean, that's probably got the greatest legs of anything. But I think even at the rally they had at the Capitol, what some of the speakers were talking about, that hey, this is what we need to do if we're going to have recreational use. We've got to get medical use first through the door. And so we need to understand that there is that conversation happening, whether we feel it's legitimate or not, out there, and we need to guard against some of those things and take a very cautious look at this whole system moving forward, and not do it with a knee-jerk reaction, but take some real conscious time to make that decision as a legislature.
Well, and I think, too, it's important to note that those of us that are sponsoring the legislation, we are talking strictly medical prescription.
Yep.
We're not talking recreational use, and I think that needs to be made clear.
I didn't mean to imply that.
The other part, too, is we have a number of states that have significant experience. There's a long track record, of law enforcement being able to aptly manage this in other states. And I think that the quality of our people in law enforcement in Minnesota is easily up to the challenge. If other states have figured it out, they can replicate that model the other states have had.
And let me add to that. There is if I look right, there is some credentialing or certification that happens within this bill that will be able to, follow where those drugs are being done, and it's legit pharmaceutical supply companies that will make this stuff available. So,
and to that issue, very to the caller, to the constituents and interested parties out there. Medical marijuana has actually passed the legislature, 3-4 years ago, Representative Falk?
Was it 2009, perhaps? I think it was vetoed by Governor Pawlenty.
Governor Pawlenty had vetoed it at the time. So my point is it's kind of a 50-50, but probably leans towards, I would guess the passage is potential for people that are interested. But I think there is a very serious policy discussion going on to dissect, and that's frankly our job. And so it's a good discussion to be having.
So in the remaining weeks, we'll have an opportunity to talk about that issue, but our always informed viewers call in with some questions that maybe the public doesn't always know that these things are going on. And a viewer from Grand Rapids, and I will say sometimes they have a level of detail and knowledge that neither the moderator or even the panel sometimes knows some of these issues. But a viewer from Grand Rapids wants to talk about an important ag issue referring to PEDV disease, porcine epidemic diarrhea virus. The viewer notes that this virus is reaching epidemic status in the hog population and wonders if the legislature is discussing it at all. Does anybody know anything about this particular ag issue?
Well, in the House, I know the House version of the omnibus spending bill, I think they put $1.2 million forward.
It was your amendment.
It was my amendment, yes, indeed.
See, I knew somebody on the panel would know something about it. Way to go.
It was my amendment working with Farmers Union, Farm Bureau, and the hog folks within the state. Set aside $1.2 million working with the University of Minnesota to do research on it. For those folks out in Pioneer Land that aren't familiar with it, it's a disease that's really been affecting young piglets. And so those pigs that are suckling on the sow have kind of a digestive block that essentially, high velocity of diarrheal issues and quickly lose weight within a few hours and pass away, up to 50% to 100% death rate along those pigs when they're infected. And even to the point down in Worthington and some of our hog slaughtering facilities, they've seen pullbacks. Instead of slaughtering 6 days a week or 5 days a week, they're dropping it to 4 days a week to really deal with that shortage of hogs. And it's being a virus. Obviously, there's some limitations on what's been able to be done, but really this is whatever we can possibly do, and I think this is going to be a growing issue as summer comes along. It only really recently came to the U.S. last year, so it's a fresh disease. It's been in the Europe since the 70s. It came from China, was first diagnosed in China, I think, in 2010. And, I think generally, we need to stay on top of it. And it's just, I think Representative Pawlowski carried a bill this last session to deal with disaster assistance. So if something happens across the state, from a bonding perspective, that we don't have to have a special session to put money forward to match federal funds if something bad happens by a tornado or a flood. I think this makes sense to put a few dollars away from the state perspective to do some research, to have money available so that, as the dollars come available, we can potentially do whatever we can to help curb this epidemic.
Well, to add a little more to this actually, the amendment took the money out of the bill I carried, which is a terrestrial plant and pest center, and I do think Representative Swedinski did a nice job with bringing forward the issue. Now, how it was handled perhaps wasn't the most artful, because it was $1.2 million. I think he just pulled it perhaps out of the air, because when I talked to the U, they didn't actually know how to spend the money. They didn't have a plan. I don't even know if you'd contacted the U to go and figure out, what they would do with it. But having worked on this Terrestrial Plants and Pest Center, which also deals with pathogens, we do have a process in place. So at least in the House bill, there is $1.2 million earmarked for this, but the U doesn't really know how they would spend it or have a process in place or really understand the nature of what they need. And it goes to the Veterinary Diagnostic Laboratory. It doesn't actually go to COAPS, which is the College of Agricultural and Food Sciences. And so there still are some details that need to be worked out in conference committee, but, applaud Representative Swedzinski for at least bringing forward the issue. I just think it could have been done. I mean, you probably could have introduced the bill or done something to, do a little bit more artful way to get the University of Minnesota on board.
Well, I think, that's part of the legislature is oftentimes, the issues come up and they sneak up on us. And, whether that be, in the Senate, I think they were able to put over $100,000 as a placeholder within your omnibus bill. So I think, between now and then, and I know conversations have been going on with the U.
It was last minute.
Yeah.
Well,
And frankly, it was kind of last minute in the Senate that
Yep.
we added a placeholder.
Yeah,
but,
and I think that's important because, as a legislature, we need to be able to react to things as they come before us. And the industry has looked at it, and I think a lot of conversations since the amendment went on has happened with the U. And, I think they've talked that there's potential, they actually could use $1.178 million of research potential. And so I think that those are good conversations to
This
have.
issue's been around since May of last year, so there would have been time to have actually put forward a bill and
Sure.
go through the committee process. But I know doing things on the floor on the fly is typically not the best way to legislate if you actually are looking for good results.
Unless you're in the Senate today. we dealt with elevator codes on the fly on the Senate today.
Water sprinklers on the unreal. It's sausage making at its worst.
It sounds kind of like the way the House used to operate.
So we have a viewer from Stillwater who wants to talk about a different topic, and that is, this viewer says, it seems like the Sunday growler sales bill has stalled. I think we're going to talk about liquor sales here. Why is that, and are there any plans to revive it before the end of the session? Who wants to be our acknowledged expert on the issue of, we're all looking at you, Representative Swedzinski.
All right. Well, I happen to be carrying that bill.
See, there you go.
And that is, we named that the Brow Brothers bill. If you ever come down to Marshall, which is the central big city of my district down in Lyon County, we've got a great brewery that's was started in Lucan in Redwood County and moved into Marshall. It's called the Brow Brothers Brewery. And essentially what the Brow Brothers bill does, which is the growler bill that was put in the omnibus liquor bill that is currently stalled through the Teamster pressure, essentially is opening up growlers, which is essentially a capped pitcher of beer that could be potentially sold on Sunday. So, a lot of across the state in rural Minnesota, Moorhead and Duluth and all over the state, we've got a lot of small microbreweries that are really trying to grow up and grow a business and really try to attract tourism to all parts of our state, especially southwest Minnesota. And, essentially, if you're going to spend a day on the road or a weekend, and, the auspice around the bill is that if you're going traveling for a weekend, we're not advocating Sunday sales. That's a completely separate issue. This is not opening up liquor stores. This is, essentially having a small product that has a very temporary lifespan and allow them to bring something back home on a Sunday so that they can maybe enjoy it and share the good products we make in rural Minnesota with their friends. And, right now the Teamsters have gotten involved with the issue and essentially trying to stall it out because that and, they're concerned that this is a moose juice nose under the head or under the tent. And so, if you're interested in that policy issue, definitely give folks a call and let them know what you think. So,
Well, it's interesting. I've heard from managers of liquor stores. I mean, there's a whole bigger system that needs to be talked about, and I don't necessarily think to pigeonhole the Teamsters on that is a fair assumption because there's a lot of other folks out there that are concerned about not just the growler but the full Sunday sales. And so I don't think we have enough time at the end of this session to really talk about the bigger picture. But and I don't even know where in the Senate. Are you on?
I'm not on those committees in the Senate either.
No, either am I. So it's interesting to see that come through.
But it is interesting. This issue seems to come up every year. There's also the bigger issue of Sunday sales, and once the camel's nose is under the tent, the camel comes under the tent, and that's that's one of the big issues that just seems to stall out year after year.
Viewers out there, the one euphemism you often hear a lot is about the camel's nose under the tent, and I don't know if it's just inside ball for legislators, but most people out there, they're not as familiar or used to that one. I support full-on Sunday sales, and I support the growler bill, and I think it's a good piece of legislation. And for people who want to go tour a brewery and want to take home a sample, I think it's a very common sense approach. But I look at the fact, too, that, there aren't a whole lot of so-called blue laws still on the books. I think it's time to go and move past those. And, for the folks that look at this, we do have people crossing borders and we're losing tax revenue. And it's ultimately, when you talk about, who really benefits here, it's the consumers. And that's ultimately, I think, who we should be working for is just the average citizens and the consumers.
Well, we'll see what happens. We move on to another question. A viewer from northern Minnesota indicates that he or she is a northern Minnesota chamber director and is concerned about snowbirds. He or she has been approached by individuals concerned about recently passed snowbird tax legislation. I think this viewer is concerned about people moving from his or her community and he or she wants to know, can the state afford to make it non-attractive for these folks to continue to reside here? And notes that they have been in the past effective members of the community. So talk about, I think this issue has been in the news lately. There was some discussion of it in the Star Tribune about whether people are in Minnesota or leaving Minnesota or attempting to establish residence elsewhere. And let's see where that takes us. We start with you, Senator Hoffman. Your thoughts on that?
I remember as a kid growing up, there was the 6 month or less than 1 day under 6 months issue, and knew lots of folks retiring and going to Florida for 5 months and 29 days and 11 hours and 59 seconds, and then coming back. And the tax committee took on a lot of stuff in the last couple of years, actually the last year and a half. And as a freshman, I've never seen some of the hardest working folks have been in, especially on the Senate side of the Senate Tax Committee. I've not had in the committees I serve on, this has not come in front of anything related to fishing or anything that I've heard of. But I can talk about the E12 provision if you want to talk about early childhood family education or school readiness. This one, I just know it's always been there, and that it's always been a concern about some tax provisions, and it's beyond where I sit right now. So
Senator Westrom, what do you think?
Well, Barry, I think it's real and becoming more and more real, and naturally we, as a state, gets less competitive or higher in the tax rate. People that have to pay those taxes are hefty bills, and oftentimes they're in their 50s or 60s, have been successful in their business. They put away money they've saved, and they like warm weather. And so there's nothing stopping them from living in Florida or Texas or Arizona or another state with either no income tax or lower tax. And I hear this frequently, and I got to say in the last a year or two, there's been more and more discussion about this. And we talked about my bigger aspirations in Congress, and I've been talking to a lot of people in western Minnesota, and I'm surprised how many have moved or talk about moving in the context. And I just talked to somebody this week, in fact, that moved to South Dakota because they live along the border, and they just finally sold their place in Minnesota, moved across the border, and that's a reality. And my district borders south of North Dakota. Some years back, we actually had this problem with license tabs, that our license tabs were so out of proportion to the neighboring states, and Governor Ventura actually took this issue on and got things back in sync, or more in line with what the other states are doing. But we actually had to pass, or did pass, we didn't have to, but we passed several $1 million to fund state patrol just to drive around the state on the borders and enforce people that had been buying out-of-state license tabs. And my point in comparison is, when things get out of whack, people do change their habits or make decisions to move. And so I think it's a reality that we need to acknowledge, because a lot of times these are also people that can invest in businesses and create jobs in our state. And if they move out of state, they take their charity and other donations with them.
Representative Falk, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's also important to clear up the fact that if you look at our tax bill that we had, unless you're making more than $172,000 as a joint filer, or you're making more than $250,000 as a married, or excuse me, $172,000 as a single filer, $250,000 as a joint filer, your taxes didn't increase. And one of the things, too, is, I mean, we're going to have a hard time competing climate-wise with some of the warmer parts of the country. But I think Senator Westrom did bring up an interesting point about when people move to Texas or Arizona or Florida, as they continue to age and need more services and need more health care services, sometimes you have a little bit of buyer's remorse when you're suddenly in one of those places that doesn't do health care as well as Minnesota does. And so, you know, it's one of the things that you never entirely avoid taxes. I know none of us like paying them, but we all like services. And so one of the things that we've done in Minnesota is we've become a little bit maybe higher cost state, but we have a high level of services, and that's one of the things that, you know, leads to our quality of life that we have. So I actually think a lot of people are going to be, you know, as they get up in age, looking at Minnesota because of the fact that we have a very good health care system, and some of the other states referenced don't do it quite as well. And they have high property taxes in some of those areas. Some of them have high sales taxes. Ultimately, you know, there just is a cost of services if you want to live someplace.
Representative Swazinski?
Yes. Well, thank you, Barry. You know, I think, you know, generally, you know, we've all had experience. We all have stories of hearing someone. I think my high school shop teacher was probably, soon, you know, he finished up his career just a couple of months after I graduated, and the first thing he did was sell his house in Minnesota and moved over to Lake Cochrane over in South Dakota. And, you know, I think those are basic things. And we can look at, you know, some very low-hanging fruit, I believe, as a legislature that will have a lot of common sense, looking at military retirees and looking at maybe some teachers, looking at those folks that maybe have some retirement plans that have not made the decision to move to Minnesota. And, you know, whether or not those folks are business owners, they could potentially become business owners or some sort of an entrepreneur. And we need to encourage that. And, you know, I think the old adage is, you know, if a lot of people hopping on, instead of pulling the wagon, people are hopping on. I think, you know, I think we've definitely seen that this year, where people feel like the burden of government has definitely been placed upon their shoulders in an increasing way, and whether that's perceived or real, you know, its perception is 9/10 of the law, and you know, I think we need to definitely address that and look for some low-hanging fruit where we can obviously improve the tax climate, improve job creation in the state. So
I have to disagree a little bit. I think perception is just that, perception, and facts are facts. The fact is that we've got more people working in the state. We've got one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country. We have one of the 5 fastest growing economies. If you take out Texas and North Dakota, which are resource-based economies, and you look at Washington and California, the only 2 other states that are outpacing us as far as economic development, we're actually doing very well. So we hear all these anecdotal things about how bad the climate is and how poor Minnesota is doing. The numbers just don't bear it out. And the fact of the matter is Governor Dayton, I think, has done an exceptional job because, and having served with Governor Plenty and Governor Dayton, Governor Plenty took a more laissez-faire, hands-off approach. Governor Dayton has taken a very active approach with the people he's put in place at agencies like Department of Economic Development and Employment. And he's done a great job bringing businesses to Minnesota, investing in people, investing in workforce, and finding ways to actually go and grow our economy, because if you don't believe government can do good work, you don't really have a lot of incentive to make it work well. If you believe government can do good work, then you can actually go and try to figure out ways where you can help the private sector, help people get better educated, and go and have a much stronger economy, and that's what we've seen with Governor Dayton.
It's interesting you bring that up. I'm been on the Midway Chamber for years. I'm on their board of directors, and we've seen the whole, you know, the Green Line tear up that whole area, and seen this revitalization and jobs. We had an economic summit just last week when everybody was on a break. I went back to work, and I'm sure you did, and so did Tori. But one of the things we specifically talked about was we have a labor shortage in this state coming up.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's clearly going to be in the future, because we have 3 million people now working in the state of Minnesota. It's the first time in the history of the state that you got some folks working, and those wages are going up for people that are working. And so, after the end of that summit, we're saying, well, what are we going to do to attract more people coming in to this state that want to work? And I'll give you another example of where that's been ardent is the Baxter Biopharmaceutical is now creating 200 jobs just in Brooklyn Park at $75,000 a pop. They're coming to Minnesota because of the fact of our high-tech and our STEM, our science, technology, and engineering and math programs that we have in the state, they're attracted to coming into Minnesota. They opened up a brand new business on 610 in Zane, and it's creating jobs, that whole 610 corridor. So that's going to be an issue for us, is where are we going to get people to come
I think
and work
it gets to the point, where we don't want to have a race to the bottom, because we're never going to outcompete some of the southern states on climate issues. I mean, they're just warmer to begin with, and they're going to pay lower wages. I'd rather have a race to the top where we compete for the best paying jobs in the growing industries, where ultimately we're going to have the best chance of continuing to have a strong economy.
Absolutely.
Senator Westrom.
Well, a little counterbalance to that. Certainly, Governor Dayton's been trying to race to the top in the tax category. That's no doubt. Frankly, the Republicans and the public stood up and said, wait a minute here, you can't be taxing us farmers for equipment repair and livestock repair. And, that was in the tax bill that you were just talking about. Warehouse tax, taxing everything from propane to groceries that are being stored in somebody else's warehouse. That was chilling, had a terrible chilling effect of people wanting to build warehouses in our state. And so we repealed that this year. So, we got two great examples just this spring in the tax bill of, you go too far and people say enough is enough. And I'm glad Governor Dayton did an about-face and the leadership helped move those bills through. But we've got clear examples of when you go too far with the tax rates, people say, I'll go somewhere else and build warehouses.
Well, in fairness, too, the warehouse tax never actually took effect. And granted, it's one of the things that we talk about down here is compromise. And that was a provision that was put in a tax bill, came back from conference committee. I didn't support it, but I liked the overall tax bill because it balanced the budget for the first time without shifts and gimmicks in more than a decade. And so sometimes you have to take a few things you don't like to get a better piece of governing legislation passed. That said, I know that there were some issues with the repair tax. I know that my family paid quite a bit on some tractor repairs that we did. And it's one of the things that it's unfortunate it was there for a little bit of time, but, we're going to survive or we're going to move past it. But as far as the warehouse tax never was implemented, I don't think that the mobile or the telecommunications sales tax, well, I can't remember if that one was actually implemented or not.
No, but the point is there were businesses that were making plans. They don't just willy-nilly just decide to build one day. They plan it. And so I'm next to North Dakota, and businesses were clearly talking, we'll just build it in North Dakota instead of in Minnesota, if that's the policy that the Democrats put forward.
Well,
I'm glad we repealed it.
It'd be interesting to see. Senator Eakin had a bill this year that actually is studying the job creation or job placement between North Dakota and Minnesota, and I think it was $150,000. I don't know if you guys did anything in the House, Tori. I don't remember that was part of that study, just because of what we've seen with the adage of trains, the adage of things that are happening in Minnesota. But let me go back to something that Representative Falk said. You're right. We finally did it without shifts and gimmicks. I served on the school board for 8 years, not 16 like somebody on the House floor always says. 8 years I served on the Hennepin School Board, which is the largest in the state of Minnesota. And I was chairing the one day that we had to go and borrow $83 million. Borrow from U.S. Bank, $83 million. Paid $450,000 or something in interest on that money that we had to borrow. And that was a $2.6 billion shift that the school districts all took. And in the last 2 years, we were able to, and granted, in Senator Westrom, if we look at, finally getting a parity or equalization on the top 1% to pay their fair share of their taxes, we wouldn't have that $2.6 billion problem 6 or 7 years ago. But we clearly cleared that up, and we made some compromises to make it right.
You talk about no shifts and gimmicks, and yet in the finance bill we had to pay back $400 million that was borrowed or taken from the Health Care Access Fund. So I don't know that anybody can talk purity about
NPR just debunked that. They gave that the pants on fire rating. That's because that was actually, for people out there, the Health Care Access Fund used to be funded by the sick tax, which was, if you go to the doctor and you have a $100 bill, you pay $102. And you're just moving money to go and fund portions of the Affordable Care Act, which otherwise would have been funded through general fund appropriations. And
I think we'll leave the shifts. I think we'll leave the shifts and gimmick argument because pretty soon we'll be going all the way back to Ventura and Perpich and Carlson and so on. So we'll just
Warren Spanish running for governor. I mean,
we'll leave that. So let's. We do have viewers though who want to talk about. They do want to talk about the minimum wage. We have a viewer from Brainerd who is in favor of the recent increase in the minimum wage, and then we have another viewer from St. Paul that wants to know why the legislature doesn't enact a tip credit. We're one of only, according to this viewer, we're one of only 6 states that don't do that. I know that this issue has been discussed at great length. We probably don't need to spend a lot of time on it, but let's talk a little bit about the minimum wage and the tip credit. Let's start with you, Senator Westrom, your views on that.
Well, for the viewer in Brainerd, they've got the bill passed. It's coming. Minnesota will now go from a lower end minimum wage to the highest in the nation at $9.50 in 2 years, and that's passed.
Was the inflation adjustment included in that?
It was. The inflation adjustment was included, so up to 2.5% automatic increase after 2018 would be adjusted with. Does put it on autopilot, and a lot of people have concern with that specific provision, even if there could be agreement on the minimum wage and what the right number is, but to put it on autopilot and take it out of the legislature's hands to really debate every year, it happens now automatically unless the commissioner studies the CPI and it's not meeting that much inflation, or the legislature would repeal that. And without us doing anything, it's going to happen automatically. And so there is a lot of concern about that, but it's been signed into law, and it'll go $8 this summer. Is it $9?
Yep.
$9 next summer, and then $9.50 the summer after.
Representative Falk, you were with us a few weeks ago, as I recall, and I think we talked about this issue, or maybe it was last year.
This is my first time this
year.
Probably last year.
Last year we talked about the minimum wage.
It slips by. It really does fly by. A couple things there. I think actually Washington State is still higher than we are, and they do have the fastest growing economy.
They're at 9.32. At least that was the facts on the Senate floor when
I don't know if they're indexed for inflation or not, but I thought that they were still higher. Actually, and we're not using the CPI, we're using the implicit price deflator, which is, I think, a little bit more accurate measure of inflation. But keep in mind, at a maximum of 2.5% increase, if you had a $10 minimum wage, that would be an increase of 25 cents. And so just, to give a little context for people. But I do think this is good policy. It's something that's far long overdue, even though perhaps the legislature talks about it. We haven't had a real raise for, going back 9 years, I think, in this state. And that's one of the challenges. And, there's a lot of people that unless you pay a living wage enough for people to actually live on, they have a higher dependence on public assistance, whether it's for food stamps, whether it's for health care, whether it's for rent, child care assistance, all of these things. And so unless people who are working in the private sector are able to make enough to go and support themselves and their families, they're going to have a higher dependence on government services. And you can't have it both ways. You can't have, a low minimum wage and expect to have low public services, low government spending on these areas. And so I think this is a good action item that was taken to go and help allow people to be more self-sufficient.
Go ahead, Senator.
I was going to say part of the compromise was, we look at the student wages and also look at the training wages and looked at folks that are working in the industries in like northern Minnesota, like specifically on the training side, and the students, especially students that come over here that work.
Resorts.
The resorts. Thank you, Chris. And one of the things we didn't look at when we look at the system, there needs to be a bigger systemic discussion about wages. We still, in Minnesota, have on our state law the ability to pay veterans and people with disabilities special minimum wage. If folks working at programs making 12 to 42 cents an hour used to have an institutional rate in Minnesota that paid people $1 a month no matter what they did, and they would go pick potatoes out of the cornfield or pick potatoes out of the potato field and work for $1 a month. And nobody's addressed those issues, and I thought we should have addressed those issues as well this year, because we still have 120,000 people in the state of Minnesota working at those special minimum wages. And I think that's a discriminatory piece, and I wish we would have addressed that as well. I agree with you, Representative Falk. It was long overdue, and we need to make those adjustments and work at it. So that's what I think really should have happened.
Representative Swazynski?
Well, I think this is a systemic issue of what's going to drive wages up at the end of the day is a competition for labor. And, we've got a lot of small cities and towns in our rural cities that have seen a huge decrease in the amount of population are living out in our rural small. I saw in Lackabarre County, Yellow Medicine County, we've seen decrease in population 10, 15%, and of that population, a high growth in age. So that demographic shift is aging. And so there's a big issue within those hospitals and nursing homes for people to attract people to come and work for them. And, one of the biggest issues that we tried dealing with this is, if this minimum wage moves up, how does that affect you? And if I talked to a lot of nursing home administrators that have said, this is right now we're having a tough time people getting in the door, and we're kind of at the top wage. We're paying $10.50 an hour for people to try to come in and start this real tough work. And they said, how hard is it going to be us to attract these folks when now everyone else? So that ability to come in and attract people to come in, which is it's very rewarding work. It's a real hard work. And the 5% campaign has been a big part of what we did. Had a lot of bipartisan support, across the aisle. We tried many times to bring it to the floor for a clean individual vote.
But it's not going to be near enough for the cost of.
Well, those are some of the issues. Yeah. So how does that work, and how is that going to affect them at the end of the day? Is that to be seen? And I've talked to a lot of business owners, Barry, that are very, very concerned about what that means. We live on a border community. I think if we were talking about bipartisanship, we could have talked about let's have some maybe it's a federal look at federal conformity when it comes to it, but essentially government wage control at $9.50 plus an inflator. I think that really puts, whether or not your business grows or shrinks, you don't hit that $9.50 unless you've done over $500,000 in sales. And, I think that, if you're a real small business, you should be very concerned about your ability to compete. And I think in general, from the outside looking in, the folks that you talk to say, hey, this is awesome, I'm going to get a wage. But, two out of three people might say that, but the third one might lose their job. And those are the folks that you're not going to hear from because they're out looking. They're out looking for a job, and that's where I'm concerned about. I'm, generally, that's what I've been hearing from my constituents.
It's interesting, you bring up the nursing homes. And remember, and I think Senator Westrom, you might have been in the House at the time where cuts to waivered services and Health and Human Services reached $1 billion, and then we looked at there was also a little shift that happened back then too. It was a $12 million shift, which last year I had a bill that took care of that $12 million shift. But in the nursing homes per se, there was a minimum wage issue that was fixed this year, and it was a $2 million fix. It was real simple, but it addressed some of the issues that I know out in your area, Senator Westrom, were very germane because Senator Eakin really talked about in the western part. But the one thing to look at, remember the 5% campaign that we did this year that truly was bipartisan, and that 5% campaign should be helping out, especially those waivered services programs. But here's the thing with the waivered services programs. Minnesota, when we looked at Health and Human Services, in the waivered services programs, you still have a spend down provision, meaning that if you make $1 more than 100% of poverty, you have to spend down to 75% of poverty. That's a $140 million price tag that I think needs to get fixed and needs to look at. So I'm going to just go back to this. The nursing homes, I don't know how they're going to compete, but we clearly have a system that needs to be fixed there. And I think getting that 5% campaign, which was truly bipartisan, was a good effort at it. And getting that the minimum wage fix was also a good effort at that as well.
But one of the dilemmas is, with the minimum wage, those entry-level jobs are going to cost more for those nursing homes or homes that take care of disabled children or people. And so the 5% will not be enough to cover it. The $2 million that we passed in the Senate bill is just a portion of the cost. And so it's going to cost more money. I mean. Well,
remember, Tori, the 5% was actually $87 million, I think. Remember, it was
right,
that? Yeah.
But that is, labor is a huge cost for our nursing homes and residential home facilities.
Well, I think it's important to remember here, too, that we had the ability to go and pay for things like the 5% campaign because we raised taxes and balanced the budget last year. And, so we had a lot of people wanting to spend money, and that was why we had such a strong bipartisan effort, and I appreciate that. It's real easy to spend money. You look at who here has voted to raise taxes and actually bring in money to pay for the spending, and there's a few of us who have done that. And so I think it's important to remember that as much as we support the 5% campaign and increases for nursing home funding and all these other things, There are a few of us that actually voted to go and raise the revenue to pay for that spending. The other thing, too, I want to get back to a point that Senator Hoffman made, is that we actually have a 3 million plus people in the workforce right now. And with the higher minimum wage, we're actually starting to see this, too, that there's talk about people moving from Wisconsin, to Minnesota to take jobs in Minnesota when you're at the lower end wage jobs. And so other border communities in other states are going to face labor shortages because they don't pay as much as we pay in Minnesota. And that's one of the things we have to remember here, too, is that,
Is that true in North Dakota, too?
I don't know about North Dakota, but I just did read something. Well, I mean,
$20 till we get McDonald's.
to the point, though, North Dakota, I mean, if you want to drive out to Minot or further west,
yeah.
I mean, but if you're actually talking about legitimate border commerce,
Or
and you've got
Wapaton or Fargo.
people who are going to be paid, at the federal minimum wage in North Dakota, or they can take a minimum wage job in Minnesota and be paid potentially $9.50 an hour in a couple of years, where are they going to go to work? And so it comes down to the fact that you're going to have labor shortages in the other states because they're not paying as much and they're not able to attract talent at the level that we're able to attract.
To close the loop, North Dakota, you couldn't hire anybody for a minimum wage or our new minimum wage because of the competition for jobs, as Representative Swazinski talked about, is great. I have a border community. Wapaton is tough pressure for Breckenridge. Fargo is tough pressure for Moorhead. And the pressure of the Western Dakota's job rates certainly filters all the way back to the east side of the state as well, just to make that point. But
Well, I think we'll probably have an opportunity to watch this unfold in the weeks and months ahead. And, we may hear something about this issue between now and November. I don't know why I think that, but I think it's possible that
Something called an election.
Yeah, that's right. It's, blind squirrels find nuts and things. Viewer from Pelican Rapids wants to know, what is the panel opinion of Minnesota Lottery with online gambling and proposal to buy lottery tickets at gas pumps? Changes in the gambling legislation. Representative Swazinski?
Sure, Barry. I've heard a lot from a lot of my gas station owners in my district. They're very concerned with especially the pay at the pump. And if you're selling gas and you've seen that if you're buying gas and filling up and going on vacation for Easter, that's a very fluctuating price. And mostly people aren't keeping their lights on as a gas station owner by selling gas. It's what they're doing inside the building. They're selling pop, they're selling groceries, they're selling this and that coffee. And lotto tickets are part of that. And from what I've heard, a lot of the folks are very concerned about what that means to bringing people in the store and kind of helping those businesses make it and thrive. And, you add that, and, I think, I'm very concerned. There was a Commerce Committee this morning talked about a little bit about trying to address some of those issues, and it's definitely a concern. But at the bottom line, there's already been contracts written. It's going to cost I think $8 million if we were to repeal some of that, and so those are real decisions we have to make as a legislature. We give some levity to the lotto folks, but maybe it's time to pull some reins back on them a little bit and get it under control.
There was a bill in the Commerce Committee, I think, to go and ban the online sale of lottery tickets, and it's something we will be talking about. I guess I don't know enough, I just haven't researched it, to understand what legal authority the state lottery has to actually conduct this type of sale. In most instances, I know as Representative, or excuse me, I keep calling you Representative. We want you back in the House, Senator Weston.
But some days, maybe.
You can't mention that name.
We can't wear wigs.
Lower name.
I think you're the only attorney on the panel here, but it's my understanding with most things, unless the legislature explicitly authorizes an entity or a unit of government to do something, they can't do it. So I think we have to go back and review what the authorizing language would be for the state lottery and just what the bounds under which they operate.
Right, and I think they're taking the liberty, and it's argumental. It may be able to be argued that they have the authority. The thing that's probably driving it is some consumers, and you talked about consumers earlier. The technology is there, but is there a way to structure that so the retailers aren't just used when they're convenient and then thrown away when they find a different way for the state to dispense them, because it is an issue. They have a lot of investment into selling lottery tickets and giving the state store space, and so it's kind of an issue, and it's a balancing act like we deal with a lot of issues.
You're right. The total balancing act. I mean, you can't. we have a problem with credit card use in the United States that created some real issues, and that's why when the Bankruptcy Reform Act happened a few years ago, they made folks, if they're going to file bankruptcy, they were supposed to go through credit counseling agencies, which there are legit credit counseling agencies in the state of Minnesota. There are 23 licensed debt prorators right in the state of Minnesota. Then you're going to start seeing an increase. The other thing is, credit cards can't be used to purchase lottery tickets right now. So if I'm at the pump and I put my piece in there, who's going to regulate? Who's going to, there's going to be some issues there.
And is it a good policy to be promoting people to be buying lottery tickets with credit cards?
Here's the question I don't understand, and I don't buy lottery tickets, and for some people, I think they get the tactile feel of it. It's kind of fun, but what is the real experience of buying a lottery ticket online? I just don't understand it.
Well, we'll leave the lottery.
Everybody's going at it.
Apparently, we're not funding the lottery with the suppliers for you here anyway. So we have a viewer who wants to know: will there be more funding approved for early learning scholarships? I'm not sure I know what that is.
I do.
Tell us very quickly. Senator Hoffman, tell us very quickly what the status of that is.
A lightning round. Yeah, there will be. Right on the Senate side, there are 3 provisions. There's early childhood family education for $8 million. There's $8 million again for the scholarships, which allows families, low-income children in certain areas and throughout the state to utilize a scholarship program to take that to a parent-aware or a certified child care setting that actually is, does some of the preschool stuff. And then there's some school readiness money that's in there as well. It's like $3 or $4 million on the Senate side. House does not have those provisions. The House puts 1% of money on the general ed formula, which then allows the local school district to decide. I don't know if the scholarship stuff is in the House. I don't think so, but it is on the Senate side. So the answer is yes if it gets all the way through.
Representative Falk, very quickly, we had a viewer who was concerned that he or she might be being scammed because she got a call. He or she got a call that if they donated to the political refund program, they'd get an amount refunded. Is this for real? I think you said you served on elections. Is that true?
I don't serve on elections.
It was you, Senator Hoffman? Okay, very quickly. I didn't mean to pick on you.
We brought that back. Everybody here,
right.
It's $50 is what, right? 50 guys and $100 per couple, right?
Per married.
Per year.
You don't have to contribute, but if you do, there is that benefit.
There is an option.
All right, so
6 to 8 weeks to normally get back. Yeah.
All right.
Political welfare system, as we say.
All right, very good.
In Minnesota.
All right, we are out of time for this evening. I want to thank our panel for joining us this evening. I want to thank you, the viewer, for being with us. I want to remind you that we will be with you next week and all the weeks that follow until the legislature goes home, whenever that might be. Next week, maybe?
No,
I don't think
19th
so.
of May.
19th of May. All right, very good. Thank you and good night.
There's much more about your legislators online at pioneer.org. Find out more about the history of the program, who's been a guest, and watch all our past episodes. There's also a photo gallery, informative links, and much more. You can also get involved and stay in touch by following us on Twitter and join the discussion on our Facebook page. Thank you for watching Your Legislators. Your Legislators is made possible in part by the generous financial support of MAPE members, making Minnesota clean waters, safe communities, quality education, and veterans care happen. We work hard for Minnesotans.